I remember that day as if the air itself had turned heavy around me. It was my daughter's birthday, a warm summer afternoon, and I had woken up early just to bake her favorite cake, a chocolate sponge, the way she's loved it since she was a little girl. My frail hands don't move as fast as they used to, and the arthritis makes cracking eggs feel like climbing a hill. But I pushed through anyway, humming the old lullabies I used to sing to her at night. When she walked into the kitchen, she didn't even smile. No hello, mama, no warm glance. She looked at me, no through me, like I was just in her way. I tried to hand her the cake, candles already pressed in, and I said softly, "Happy birthday, sweetheart." And that's when she said it. She looked me dead in the eye, rolled hers a little, and muttered, "The best gift would be if you just died." Her words didn't just land, they burned. They wrapped around my chest so tightly I couldn't breathe. I laughed it off, like an old woman brushing crumbs from the table. "You don't mean that," I told her. But she meant it. At that moment, my heart cracked. Not in silence, but loud inside me, like a tree splitting in a storm. When you've lived as long as I have, you carry whole lifetimes in your memory. And when I think of my daughter, my mind doesn't go first to that cruel sentence she threw at me. Number. It goes back to the very beginning, back to the day she was born. I was so young then. Not young in numbers, maybe. I was already in my 30s. But young in the way you look at the world, when you still think everything is possible. She was my first child, my miracle baby. I remember clutching her tiny body in the hospital, her fist wrapped around my finger, her cries softening the moment she heard my voice. I thought, this is it. This is my purpose. I wasn't a rich woman, no. Life didn't hand me silk sheets or gold necklaces, but what I had, I gave to her. Every ounce of energy, every bit of hope, every coin I could spare. I worked my fingers raw, cooking for neighbors, mending clothes, sometimes taking in laundry just so I could afford her school supplies. When she was little, she adored me. I used to braid her hair before school, ribbons tied neatly at the ends. She'd run back after class, breathless with excitement, waving her drawings in the air. "Look, Mama! Look what I made!" she'd say, and I would hang every one of those scribbles on the wall as if they were priceless art. Birthdays were always simple back then, but oh, how I tried to make them special. A cake, if I could afford it, or sometimes just a few sweet rolls dusted with sugar. She didn't mind. She would clap her little hands, and that smile of hers, wide, toothy, full of innocence, made all the effort worth it. Her father, well, he wasn't around much. Work, he said. Sometimes I think he just didn't know how to be present. So it was mostly me and her against the world. We were a team. I thought nothing could break that bond. But children grow, and somewhere along the way, the little girl who used to press her forehead against mine when she was scared of the dark started pulling away. It was gradual at first. An eye roll when I hugged her too tightly in front of her friends, or a sigh when I reminded her to wear a jacket in the cold. That's normal, I told myself. Teenagers are like that. But then came the sharp words, the impatience, the feeling that I embarrassed her. I would cook her favorite meals, only for her to push the plate away and say, "Ugh, do you always make the house smell like this?" I would try to ask about her day, and she'd slam her bedroom door instead. Still, I believed it was just a phase, a storm we had to ride out. I told myself, she'll come back to me. She just needs time. I worked harder than ever to give her opportunities I never had. College savings, new clothes when she wanted to fit in with her friends. I even sold the few pieces of jewelry my own mother left me, just so she could afford the school trip she was begging to go on. I thought, I thought love would be enough, that if I kept giving, she would keep seeing me as her anchor, her safe place. But love doesn't always get returned, does it? Sometimes it just drains out of you like water poured into a cracked pot, and you don't notice until it's too late. The older she got, the more she seemed to resent me. Not for what I did, but for what I wasn't. I wasn't rich. I wasn't glamorous. I wasn't the kind of mother who could buy her designer handbags or throw grand parties. I was just me, plain, practical, steady. And maybe, in her eyes, that wasn't enough. You see, I never remarried after her father passed. My life was her. Every morning, every night, every sacrifice in between. But somewhere along the road, she stopped seeing it as love and started seeing it as a burden. And that's how we arrived at this point. A warm summer day, her birthday, me with a cake in my frail hands, thinking maybe, just maybe, the child I raised would look at me with the same love I had for her. Instead, she wished me dead. And you know what? Maybe in her mind, she thought she was being funny. Maybe she thought it was just a cruel joke. But I've lived long enough to know when words are meant, and hers were meant. That's the thing about life. It's not the strangers who can break your heart the deepest. It's the ones you raised, the ones you trusted with your love. I didn't answer her then. I didn't scream. I didn't cry in front of her. I just swallowed the ache and let the silence fill the room. But inside me, something was shifting. Because when someone shows you how little they value you, you have two choices. You can keep begging for scraps of kindness, or you can stand up and remind yourself of your worth. And that's where my story truly begins. After that birthday, you'd think I would have broken down. And believe me, my nights were heavy with tears no one ever saw. But on the surface, I carried on, the way old women do, with quiet endurance. Still, something had changed. You see, words like the ones my daughter spoke don't come out of nowhere. They're the fruit of a tree that's been growing for years. And when I look back, I see the roots clear as day. She had started treating me not like her mother, but like an obstacle. Take the house, for instance. This old house where I've lived for most of my life. Every wall carries a memory. The mark on the kitchen door frame from where she grew taller each year. The patch on the living room floor where her toy blocks once scattered. The rose bushes outside that I planted with her when she was only 7 years old. But now, she looks at the house as if it's just a piece of property she's waiting to inherit. She said as much, too. "This place is falling apart," she'd tell me, wrinkling her nose. "When you're gone, I'll finally renovate it properly. Maybe even sell it when you're gone. Do you hear that? Not if, not someday in the far future, just when." Every time she said those words, I felt a sting in my chest. I wanted to tell her, "This is my home. This is where your childhood lives. How can you speak of it as if it were just money waiting to be cashed in?" But the words caught in my throat. She'd bring her friends over sometimes, not to visit me, but to parade them through the house like a real estate agent. I'd overhear her saying things like, "Oh, once I get my hands on this place, I'll knock down this wall, put in new floors." As if I were already gone, as if I were invisible. It wasn't just the house, either. It was me. When I asked her to help me with simple things, carrying groceries, changing a light bulb, she'd sigh, roll her eyes and say, "You should think about moving into a home, Mama. Don't you think you're too old to live here alone?" Alone. That word cut deep. I wasn't asking for much. Just a little bit of help, a little bit of company. But in her eyes, I was nothing more than an inconvenience. The funny thing is, when she wanted something from me, she could turn sweet in a second. "Mama, "Could you lend me a little money?" she'd ask, her tone soft, almost childlike. "It's just for a few bills. I'll pay you back." But of course, she never did. The money went one way, from my hands to hers, and I gave it, because that's what mothers do. We give, even when it hurts. One evening, I overheard her on the phone. She thought I was asleep in my chair, but my hearing isn't as weak as she imagines. She was speaking to someone, maybe a friend, maybe her partner, and she said, "I just need her to hold on a little longer. Then everything will be mine. The house, the savings. I won't have to worry anymore. Everything will be mine." I can't explain the pain of hearing your child speak of you like that, as though your life is just a clock ticking down to their convenience. Do you know what it feels like to sit at the table with someone who once clung to your hand crossing the street and realize they're waiting for your death like it's a prize? It feels like drowning slowly, while the person you love most watches without lifting a finger. She stopped visiting as often after that, and when she did, it wasn't for me. It was to check, to see if I was weaker, frailer, closer to the end. Sometimes she'd bring up nursing homes again, insisting it was for my safety. But I knew better. She didn't want me safe. She wanted me gone. And the truth is, I started to wonder if maybe she was right. Maybe I was too much of a burden. Maybe the best gift really would be to fade quietly, to let her have what she so desperately wanted. But then, something inside me hardened, because I realized if I gave in, if I let her win, then everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, would be for nothing. And I refused to let my life end as a convenience for someone else. I started to watch her more carefully, her words, her eyes, the way she walked through this house, like it already belonged to her. And in those quiet hours, I made a choice. She thought she knew me. She thought I was weak, frail, harmless. She thought I would simply sit here and wait for death like an obedient old woman. But she was wrong, because in my heart, I knew something she didn't, something I had kept secret all these years. And one day soon, I was going to reveal it. There's a saying my own mother used to whisper to me when times were hard. An old tree may look hollow, but its roots still run deep. I carried that saying with me for years, but I never truly understood it until I turned 85, until the day my own daughter wished me gone, because she thought I was hollow, brittle bones, shaky hands, cloudy eyes. What she didn't know was that beneath all of that, my roots were still strong. And those roots held secrets she couldn't begin to imagine. You see, all my life I saved, quietly, carefully, in ways no one ever noticed. My daughter thought I had nothing, just this old house and a few coins tucked in my purse. But what she didn't know was that every extra penny from the years I cooked, cleaned, and worked, I put aside. Not in banks she could trace, but in small investments, in savings tucked away under different names, in bonds and certificates that had grown quietly, silently, over the decades. I never told her. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I wanted her to grow into a woman who valued effort, who made her own way. I thought one day, when she showed me kindness and responsibility, I would pass it all down to her. Not just money, but a legacy of resilience. But that birthday, those cruel words, they told me the truth. She didn't see me as a mother anymore. She saw me as a barrier between herself and what she believed was hers. So I made a decision. I decided she would not inherit what she didn't value. The very next morning, I pulled out the small wooden box I keep hidden under the floorboards in my bedroom. My hands shook as I unlocked it, not from fear, but from the weight of the choice I was about to make. Inside were the papers, the keys, the documents that proved what she never knew, that her old, tired mother wasn't poor at all. There were bonds worth more than she could imagine. A deed to a small piece of land on the edge of town, bought decades ago when property was cheap and everyone laughed at me for wasting my money on dirt. That dirt is now worth a fortune. There were letters, too, from an old friend, a lawyer, who had helped me set up a trust fund long ago. All of it hidden in plain sight. For years, I planned to leave it to her, to make her life easier after I was gone. But now I realized giving it to her would be like tossing pearls into a fire. So I sat down at my desk, pulled out my pen, and I began to rewrite everything. The will, the trust, the inheritance, not a single coin, not a single brick of this house, not a single flower from the garden would go to the daughter who wished me dead. Instead, I decided my legacy would go to someone, or perhaps many someones, who understood value, who understood love. Maybe my grandchildren, maybe a charity, maybe even that young neighbor boy who carries my groceries without ever being asked. People who saw me as a human being, not as a ticking clock of wealth. As I wrote, a calm washed over me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I didn't feel small. I felt like the woman I used to be, the woman who raised a child on her own, who survived loss, who built a life from scraps and stubbornness. I was reclaiming my story. Of course, I didn't tell her. Number. Let her believe what she wants. Let her walk through this house with her greedy eyes, imagining the renovations she'll make, the furniture she'll sell, the money she'll spend. Let her dream of the inheritance waiting just beyond my last breath. She'll never see it coming, and maybe that's cruel. Maybe some would say I should forgive, that I should still leave her something because she is my child. But I ask you, what kind of lesson would that be? To reward cruelty with riches? To tell her that disrespect has no consequence? Number. Sometimes love means teaching the hardest lesson of all. And so my decision was made. Quietly, without drama, without shouting or tears. Just the scratch of a pen across paper and a mother's final gift, not of money, but of truth. The gift of knowing that her words, her greed, her coldness cost her everything. That night, as I tucked the papers back into their hiding place, I felt lighter than I had in years. I looked at my reflection in the window, my wrinkled face, my silver hair, and I smiled. Because for the first time, I wasn't the victim of her cruelty. I was the author of her fate. For weeks after I rewrote the papers, life carried on much as it always had. My daughter came and went, her visits growing shorter, her words sharper. I didn't let on that anything had changed. I smiled when she sighed. I nodded when she complained. I pretended not to hear when she whispered to her friends about when the house is finally mine. Let her believe her fantasy. That was part of my plan. But something inside me had shifted. I was no longer the desperate, broken mother begging for scraps of affection. I had made my choice, and that choice gave me a strength she could never understand. One afternoon, she stormed into the kitchen, slamming her purse down on the counter. "Mama," she snapped, "why do you keep wasting money on these groceries? You should be saving every penny. You won't need all this food when you move into a home." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, I didn't flinch. I simply said, "Don't worry about my money. I know exactly where it's going." She blinked, surprised. Maybe she thought it was just the rambling of an old woman. She didn't know those words were the truest thing I'd spoken to her in a long, long time. Then came the day that sealed it. I had invited a lawyer friend of mine, the same one who had helped me long ago, to visit the house. My daughter happened to arrive just as he was leaving. She asked, her eyes narrow, What was that about? Oh, I said casually, wiping my hands on a towel. Just updating some paperwork. Making sure everything is in order. Her face paled. For the first time, I saw worry flicker across her expression. She knew exactly what I meant, though I gave her no details. She pressed me for answers, her voice sharp, but I just smiled and said, "All in good time, my dear." From that day forward, her visits changed. Suddenly she was sweeter. She brought flowers, cheap ones from the grocery store, but still, flowers. She sat at the table and asked, "How are you feeling, Mama?" Her voice syrupy, her hands fidgeting. She even baked me a pie once, though she burned the crust. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed she'd found her heart again. But I knew. I knew it wasn't love that softened her eyes. It was fear. Fear that the inheritance she had been counting on might slip through her fingers. She started circling the subject whenever we spoke. "Mama, you know I'll take good care of the house when it's mine." Or, "Mama, I hope you've kept your will simple. No need to make things complicated." Each time I would just sip my tea, smile, and say nothing. Let her stew in her own anxiety. And then one evening it happened. She came over unannounced, her face flushed, her voice shaking with barely contained panic. "Mama," she said, "I need to know, you didn't change anything, did you? You didn't give this house to anyone else?" I set down my teacup slowly, the porcelain clinking against the saucer. I looked her in the eye, my daughter, my blood, the same child who once cried in my arms after scraping her knee, and I said calmly, "You'll see everything when the time comes." Her jaw tightened. She wanted to scream, I could see it. But she forced a smile instead, patted my hand, and left without another word. I closed the door behind her and leaned against it, my chest heavy but my spirit light, because for the first time she understood. She understood that her cruelty had consequences, that the inheritance she had built her future upon was no longer hers for the taking. And though she didn't know the details, she knew enough. Her greed had cost her everything. I wish I could tell you she truly changed after that she apologized, that she rediscovered the love she once had for me. But life is rarely so neat. Her kindness remained an act, her visits a performance. But here's the difference. Now I wasn't the one suffering. I held the power, because when I'm gone, she'll discover the truth written in black and white. That everything she dismissed, everything she disrespected, everything she thought she was entitled to, will slip through her hands, and in its place, she'll be left with the knowledge that her words, "The best gift would be if you just died," became the knife that cut her away from her inheritance. Poetic justice, and maybe, just maybe, the bitter taste of that truth will teach her a lesson no amount of money ever could. When I lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling while the house creaks with age, I often ask myself, where did I go wrong? Did I give too much? Did I make life too easy for her, so she never learned the weight of sacrifice? Did I shield her so much from struggle that she mistook love for weakness? Maybe. Or maybe the truth is simpler. Sometimes, no matter how much love you pour into a person, they will still choose emptiness. And that's a hard truth to carry as a mother, because we're taught to believe our children will always love us the way we love them. But life doesn't always work that way. I don't tell you this story to make you pity me. I tell you this because I want you to understand something that took me 85 years to learn. Respect matters more than blood. You can share a roof, a name, even the same beating heart for 9 months. But if there is no respect, if there is no kindness, then what you have is not love. It's dependency. And dependency without love curdles into resentment. My daughter thought I was weak because I am old. She thought my silence was surrender. She thought my love was endless, something she could spit on and still collect from when I was gone. But I want you, whoever is listening to me now, to hear me clearly. There comes a time when silence is no longer grace. It's permission. And when you give someone permission to mistreat you, they will never stop. So you must draw your lines, even if it hurts, even if it's your own child. I still love her. Don't think for a moment that I don't. Love doesn't just vanish because it's bruised. I love her with the ache of every sleepless night, with the memory of her tiny hand in mine, with the echo of lullabies I once sang to calm her tears. But love does not mean reward, and love without boundaries is just an invitation for pain. So yes, I made my choice. I will leave behind what I have built, but not for the one who wished me gone. My legacy will not be measured in coins or land. It will be measured in the lesson she is forced to face, that cruelty has a cost. And when she opens that will one day, and her greedy hands find nothing but the weight of her own words reflected back at her, perhaps then she will understand. Perhaps then she will feel for the first time the hollow ache she left in me. And maybe, just maybe, she will change. But even if she doesn't, I will rest knowing that I did not allow my life's worth to be reduced to a transaction of inheritance. I lived, I loved, I gave, and I left my story in my own hands. So to you, listening to me now, let this be my advice. Don't ever let someone, not even your own blood, convince you that your value lies in what you can give them when you're gone. Your value is in the love you carry, the respect you demand, and the dignity you hold on to until your very last breath. And if the day comes when someone you love looks you in the eye and wishes you gone, take a deep breath, stand tall in your soul, and remember, you are not a burden. You are not disposable. You are a root that still runs deep. And sometimes, the best gift you can give is the lesson they never expected.